Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EduTech Digital Summit 2020. Our next presenter will be Mr. Johnny Ball, who is a television personality and math, science and education motivator from the United Kingdom. We're all very much so looking forward to your presentation, Johnny, and I will now hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Usually I get a round of applause now, but it's very difficult doing it this way, but here we go. My talk today is really entitled, It's Time to Teach Hope and Certainty Rather than Fear and Confusion to Our Kids. Based on what that's based on is my worry that over the years, basically because of political interference, science, mathematics, and most subjects have been dumbed down. So but more than that, kids are actually taught fear and confusion and doubt about the future, very often because the teachers themselves have those doubts. The school books have been changed over the years by politicians so that everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet. And what that's done is dumbed it all down. And that is really not very good for those gifted kids and things like that. So so there's a terrible problem. There's no broadness in the curriculum anymore. There's no width. There's no time. What they do is they have the books, they teach you a few facts, then they issue already printed quiz notes, if you like, that they fill in to show that they've absorbed it, and they move on. And there's no flexibility, and I worry about that. So though I'm worried about the future, I'm going to give you hope for the future today. That's why I'm here. Okay. How did I start? Well, at primary school, I was always top or next to top and definitely top in maths. And I had a wonderful time in Bristol in southern England. Passed my 11 plus high flyer and moved. My parents moved to Bolton in Lancashire, 200 miles away. And I found them and moved with them. And I went to school in Bolton. But this was 1949, before television. And 200 miles difference in England before television, your accent was like a foreign language. And the teachers genuinely didn't understand me very well. The first year, I got the prize in maths and a prize in chess. And 5 years later, I was at the bottom with 2 O levels. One was maths, and then they were amazed to find I'd got 100% in maths. I probably taught it myself. I left school a failure. Luckily got a job in the aircraft industry and took off. The aircraft industry, right? Okay, but I did. I passed other people on the business course very quickly and realized there was nothing wrong with me, and my confidence grew. I went into the RAF, 3 years, my university. It taught me all about people and life and how you could really achieve if you put your head down and worked. That was terrific. Then I came out and I became a stand-up comedian. Now, stand-up comedy, why? Because I believed the best career you could have would be to make people happy. What better career could there be? And that's what I did. But what it taught me was communication skills. And those have stood me in good stead because I was in television for 40 years or so, BBC 25 years. I wrote 20 series of factual information programs, but no university. So where did I get that from? I got that from these books. And these books are so, this pile here is so high, I'm going to use it as my idiot board in a minute, okay? But the books I read, maths books especially, a man called Martin Gardner, who used to write for Scientific American, was an absolute magnet to me. And I grew to him, bought all his books, as did many other people who now teach maths today. He was quite brilliant. And what was his discipline? He was basically a magician. He loved doing card tricks. He loved playing with life. And that's what it was all about. So what did I do? I wrote 20 series of factual information programs, won many awards. I wrote 5 educational stage musicals. I wrote 9 books, of which there you are, Wonders Beyond Numbers is the latest. Okay. And in all that, I was also in the 90s an ambassador for British engineering, and I was president of the National Association for Gifted Children in the UK. And that taught me a lot. That's why I feel it's relevant that I talk today. I saw that the pace of education was very often too slow for the gifted. And so they were bored out of their minds and they got disruptive and all kinds of problems ensued. What you had to do was not move them up a year. What you had to do was broaden the learning, put it out in tangents. And once you start doing that, you enrich the teaching experience. You can take them along all kinds of avenues and branches and really enrich it. It's so important to do that. And that's what we did. Not only does that help the gifted, it helps those of average ability and even those below, because now they're getting more interesting things coming to them and their minds are stimulated. That's what education needs more than ever. Frankly, it's what I've been doing for about 40 years. Can I explain how it works? By doing things that I do in my lectures all the time. I'm going to talk to you about quite amazing things. For instance, in mathematics, there's a problem with square roots, isn't it? Finding the square root of something is really quite a problem. However, the Greeks had a totally different attitude to mathematics. And if we taught the Greek way today, I'm sure we'd create many more mathematicians and scientists who would improve the world no end. But we don't. So what did the Greeks do? The Greeks didn't do numeracy. They hated numeracy. They didn't even give their numbers names. 1 was A, 2 was B, 3 was C, and so on. No numeracy, but they did do geometry. And geometry is pictorial. Geometry is things you can see and understand. Geometry is so enriching and rewarding. So I'm going to teach you in about a minute how to find the square root of absolutely any number using a ruler and a pair of compasses. What? Yeah, this dates back to a man called Hippocrates, not the medic, living at the same time, the mathematician Hippocrates of Chios. What you do, let's say we want to find the square root of 3,600, no, hang on, 9. Thank goodness for that. We know the answer, but let me show you how we find it. First of all, you produce a line. I hope you can see that. I'm moving more towards you. Can you see that? You may not be able to read the numbers, but believe me, the numbers are self-evident. 0 here and a line in units that gets us to 9. So that's what you do. You produce a line and find the number of units, the number you want to find the square root of 9. Then you add 1. Why? Because that's what makes it work. Okay, so it's 10. When you've got 10, you find the middle, 5. And with 5 as radius, you produce a semicircle. Once you've done that, you take the 9 and raise the perpendicular. You draw that line. And when you measure it, you'll find that that line is always, for any number, that line is the square root of that. In this case, it's 3. Now, in my normal lecture, I explain how that works. I'm not going to do it today because I want to move on and show you lots of other things. Show you how things can be very powerful. Isn't that powerful? Finding the square root of any number just with a line and a pair of compasses. The first of all Greek mathematicians, or famous ones, successful ones, was Thales of Miletus. And Thales was quite incredible. Thales was walking along one day looking at the stars, and he fell down a hole. And a lady watching said, "How come you're studying the stars when you don't know what's at your feet?" And that was a revelation to him. And no time after that did he study astronomy. Everything he did was to do with what happens to us on Earth. What is important to us in mathematical terms? I follow the same route, okay? So he then asked, when you're on the seashore, how far is the horizon? Do we know? We know the horizon. And from that thought, we know that he knew that the Earth was round. We're told, oh, they thought it was flat. People were scared of sailing off the end of the Earth because they thought it was flat. Rubbish. Mathematicians have always known the Earth is round. And he knew, and he asked this question. Okay. Can you see that? Just in. Yeah, that's it. Okay. If you're standing on the seashore and your eyes are 2 meters above the waterline, then the horizon is 5 kilometers away. That's fact, okay? And that's rough, okay? 2 meters high with your eyes, 5 kilometers is what you can see. The question Thales asks, and I'm asking you, is how high do your eyes need to be to see not 5, but 10 kilometers away? And the answer is not twice as high. It's 2 times 2 or 4 times as high. Now I rip this one away. You should be able to see, can you see that? That if your eyes are 8 meters high, you'll be able to see 10 kilometers. What about seeing 3 times as far? Well, it's not 3 times as high, or 3 times 3, or 9 times as high. So 2 meters needs to become 18 meters. You need a hotel or a cliff, and now you can see 15 kilometers. This was the first known successful Greek mathematician, and he's dealing with this kind of thing. Why do we need this maths today? Well, you would need it if you wanted to put a satellite in space or send a rocket to Mars. So you see, these basic, simple ideas that they had were so important to them. And they were cracking these solutions, giving these solutions, even then, the first of the Greek mathematicians. So do you see how powerful geometry is? Now, what I've just told you, that squares system, that crops up again and again with a lad called Galileo. Now, Galileo had great fears and doubts in his life, perhaps like us, except his were valid because he'd helped develop the telescope, didn't discover it, but helped develop it. And from that, he could see that the Earth was not at the center, that the sun was at the center and the planets were revolving around it. He was certain it was true. He proved it. It was absolutely certain. So his fear was that the church couldn't understand or wouldn't understand, but the church couldn't throw out the rule book. And the rule book was the Bible, the Word of God, except it was written by men, perhaps on the influence of God, but it was still written by them. And it was only written with the knowledge they had at the time. As knowledge improves or increases, you can see how ancient people often got things wrong because they didn't have the knowledge. So there we are. He did everything, improving almost, getting, because he would stick to his guns and he had to prove it was so. And so he did it. How did he do it? Well, it all started when he was about 17. And we are told he was in Pisa Cathedral. Here are the props, folks. Okay. And he saw a chandelier swinging. And he started to time it. Because every week when he went to church, it swung a little. Perhaps a breeze blew through the cathedral to keep them cool in hot Italy. And he always used to go tick, 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 tick. The following week, there might be more wind. Tick, 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 tick. The following week, hardly any wind, but just a slight movement. Tick, 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 tick. And he said, it's the same tick. He was a soppy lad. He was 17, but it's the same tick. So he went home and he made his own pendulum. And he started to experiment with it. And here I've got a pendulum going tick, 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 tick. And that's governed by the length of the string. So the question is now, where would I grip the string for it to swing twice as fast? You might say half. Can you see my top hand? Half is about there. Tick, 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 tick. It doesn't work. The answer, remember Thales? The answer is a quarter. Tick, 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 twice as fast. A quarter of the string. 1 quarter, 3 quarters. It's very, very similar to looking out to the horizon. And he was now on a roll. It all came much later. We're told that he dropped balls off the Leaning Tower of Pisa. He never wrote that. He never wrote it. People have written they heard the crowd cheering as things fell. But he never said that he ever did that. But what he did do was realize that he couldn't time things because there were no clocks. So he had to slow everything down. So what he did, now there are 3 illustrations here. We're going to deal with this one first. What he did was got a slope, made a groove, and rolled a cannonball down the slope. And he found it didn't matter what the tilt was. It was always the same. In the first unit of time, it was going to go one distance. But in the second unit of time, it went 3 more, making 4 altogether. Then 5, making 9. Then 7, making 16. So the ball is increasing speed by the square of the unit time taken. And that's what he discovered. So how did he celebrate that? He got on his bike and drove off a cliff. No, he didn't have a bike. That's right. But if you drove off a cliff and don't do it on your bike. No, do it on somebody else's bike. But if you go off a cliff, right, you'll find whether it's a car or a bicycle, the speed determines the curve length and the unit time you're going across there. But it doesn't change the falling rate. In 1 unit, if you fall that distance, we'll call it 1. In the second equal unit, you will have fallen 4, then 9, then 16, then 25. It's the same. To celebrate this, he went out to fire a cannon. And here's our cannon. And a cannonball wants to go in a straight line forever, but it doesn't. It falls to earth. How does it fall to earth? He didn't know why it fell to earth. He only knew there was some force, and he knew how it worked. He said, in this distance, it will have fallen something. I don't know what it is, but it will have fallen something. In the next equal period of time, it will have fallen 4 of them, then 9 of them. And that is how cannonballs fly through the air, bullets fly through the air, and rockets fly into space. He got the understanding of movements created by a force he didn't know about, the force of gravity. He had a friend who he never met. The chap was called Johannes Kepler. Excuse me. And being German, he spoke like this. Here's what I'm finding. I'll drop that. This is what he did. He made a toy with a ball and string. Okay. And he found if he spun the ball would stop spinning. But if he gave this slight pulling, the ball keeps spinning, but not in circles, because the string is shorter, longer. They're egg-shaped spins. He found the planets are going around the sun in egg-shaped spins or ellipses. He discovered all that, and he died. But the last book where he published all this was actually printed in England. Why? Because he'd run out of backers in Germany and the countries around. So he got help from England. And who read that book? By a man called Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton showed exactly how it worked. There's Isaac Newton who made one of these. If you're in education and science, make one of these. Or maths, make one of these for the kid. They are wonderful. And you can actually feel that there's more pressure, more strain as the ball goes around here, and much less around there. So what did Newton say? Newton said, a planet this far from the sun requires a certain force to hold in orbit. A planet twice as far away only requires a quarter of the force to hold it. A planet here, certain force to hold it in orbit. A planet half as near, 4 times the force to stop it spinning off in space. And that's what he discovered. He discovered gravity and changed the world forever. Now, is there a sad thing about this? Yes, because we're told today that he thought of an apple falling on the floor. I have looked and looked, and I have never found he had written the word apple, not once. There's a man called Voltaire, and Voltaire visited England. Why? Because he'd fallen out with everybody in France, and it was French. All right, he was a Jacques the lad. He was very cocky, and he came to England, And he interviewed Newton in the last year of his life when Newton was really quite doddly, a little old man on a stick, right? And he interviewed him, but he also interviewed his niece, who was his housekeeper, Newton's housekeeper. And one of them, we're not sure which, it seems may have said, I or Isaac thought about apples falling from a tree. That's the only reference. And we're not even sure whether it was the niece or whether Newton who actually said it. But really, Newton thought that way? Rubbish. Let me show you this. This was found after Newton had died, and he'd drawn it. It's an image of the earth, okay? And it's his. And it explains gravity. He said, if you come to a high ground and you throw a ball sideways, it will fall to earth. Throw it harder, it'll go further, but still fall to earth. He thought, well, what if you could throw it so superhumanly hard that it went round the earth and came back? Then, he said, if you throw the ball, it might fly the earth in parallelation, all the borders of this nation, across the ocean's aquilation, around the earth's great globulation, and like the moon in its gyration, describe a perfect circulation, arriving with unexpectation at my rear side elevation. Oh, eureka! What a revelation! Methinks I've discovered gravitation, for stone and moon in their gyration desire a true delineation. They want to go straight on without deviation. So why do they go round in circulation? It must be the earth's weight and gravitation. The earth's great weight is the persuasion that holds us down to our frustration, and the moon's acceleration equals the pull of gravitation, causing it without cessation to turn in constant revelation. These laws of universal gravitation were the results of his amalgamation, and should be viewed not with somber meditation, but with elation, affectation, and highly mirthful levitation. The sad ending there is that he was only known to have laughed once in his entire lifetime. What a terrible role model. He really was, but he was a genius. But you see the link, it's all to do with squares of distances and things, and it's the same mass as Thales had discovered when he started to study the circular or spherical earth and the horizon. See how it links, and see how powerful it is and easy it is to understand it. Let's move on to a bit of science. There's a brilliant scientist who was self-taught, and his name, I'm 82 now, and if a name goes, to get it back is very difficult, but John Dalton was the lad, and John Dalton was the man. And John Dalton was a very simple soul. He was a Quaker. He spoke like this: knowest thou canst not split the atom, or no, why? And he was a very soft soul. He explained the atomic theory. And the atomic theory is the basis of all chemical and physics today. It's withstood the test of time. It's absolutely right. And he was the one who discovered it. It was Mendeleev later on and all the others who improved it and built on it. But he was the one who started it. And he started it with this. He built a weather station and he went to test the weather every day for nigh on 50 years. And he found that the atmosphere was about 80% nitrogen and 20% oxygen. And he thought, why? Why a ratio of 4:1? Why? And he didn't know. Then he studied marsh gas. Now, marsh gas used to seep through the ground in Lancashire, where he lived. In fact, on a rainy day in the evening, when it was dark, you could go down to a puddle or a pond and see bubbles coming up through it. And if you lit them, it would burn with a blue flame, not a hot flame, but a blue flame. I mean, it's hot if you put your finger in, but it wasn't fiercely hot, and it bubbled. He studied marsh gas and found it was made of hydrogen and carbon. Okay. and he found that for every carbon, there seemed to be 4 hydrogens. Then he found it would only burn in the presence of oxygen. But when it does burn, it mixes up. And I've explained this in one of my musicals because I set it to music. I'm going to set it to music and sing it to you now. Dalton was a simple soul, rather like the English comedian George Formby, a simple soul who always succeeded in the end. George Formby always got the girl. John Dalton always solved the problem. Okay, so here is my rendition. Clears his throat, right? My rendition of John Dalton's Atomic Theory. Ding 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 ding, ding 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 ding. My atomic theory I started to create when I found each element has its own specific weight. Oh, every time you light a fire, as the flames rise higher and higher, to understand what transpires, take my atomic theory. Whether it's coal or oil you use, whatever fuel have I got to use, it's hydrocarbons that you use. My atomic theory, hydrogen's the element that we use the most. Carbon is the black stuff you get when you burn the toast. Of course, these two will never burn without good old oxygen, and what becomes of them you'll learn in my atomic theory. Ding, 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 ding. Every time a fire starts, hydrocarbons split apart, then the oxygen takes part in my atomic theory. First, the carbon looks twice fair, oxygen joins as a pair, carbon dioxide hits the air. My atomic theory, then hydrogen and oxygen join up as a team, and they become an H2O, which billows up as steam. The result of this chemical change is nothing lost, nothing gained, but energy is unrestrained in my atomic theory. Now, what about as animals? As energy we burn. Just what happens inside us? This is what I learned. The food that we consume each day is hydrocarbon all the way, but carbohydrates, what we say. It's my atomic theory. So carbohydrate, crushed and strained, goes through your stomach and your veins to your muscles, tissue, brains, my atomic theory. Then oxygen is introduced, gulped in through your lungs and through your blood and arteries. Look out, here it comes. You bend your back to lift a load, body energy explodes, you burn up calories in lows, my atomic theory. Ding, 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 ding. When an athlete jumps or runs, carbon dioxide, out it comes, pumps out by his heart and lungs, my atomic theory. Athletic exhilaration causes water emanation from your pores as perspiration, my atomic theory. First, the hydrocarbons split with oxygen on hand. Then these 3 elements recombine as Mother Nature planned, producing all our energy in fire or human activity. It's all the same thing, don't you see? It's my atomic theory. Ding, 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 ding. Thank you. So there's John Dalton's atomic theory. Can I have a glass of water? There you go. So I'm going to close now, but in closing, I want you to think about what I've just told you. There are three substances: water, CO2, and oxygen, and they are the triumvirate that make life on Earth possible. Today, if you ask a child in any school, in primary school, is CO2 good or bad, they will say it's bad. And that is bad. All right, we are causing trouble with the Earth. We are causing climate change. There's no question. We are part of the cause of climate change. But do we really understand what we're talking about? CO2 is produced when anything rots or ferments, or when we breathe out, because I will breathe out 2 kilograms of CO2 myself today, and a cow or a horse perhaps twice as much. Okay, but CO2 is half as heavy as air again. Did you know that? So when it rises, and it does rise because it's produced with heat. Your breath is warm, and up goes the CO2. But as soon as it reaches the ambient temperature, it falls. And so there's so little CO2 in the atmosphere. At the moment, 0.04 of 1%. Okay, it's very small. There's 100 times more water, and water does create climate change. If it's cloudy tonight, then tomorrow the morning will be mild. If there's no cloud tonight, then you might have frost in the morning because all the heat will have escaped. So water is very much a climate change gas. CO2 is as well, but to what extent? We're not sure. We really aren't sure. All I know is to understand what is happening to the world, we need to be experts. We need to then influence the people who produce our industries, who cause our pollution, to persuade them to do it better, to cause less damage, to improve and take care of the earth. But it's experts that need to do it. It is not children worrying at school. That is not the time. At school, it should be a happy time where you play with your mates, you have great fun, and you're very confident about the future. I cannot tolerate kids not being confident about the future because of the way the situation is, and because often their teachers aren't confident. Have faith, have confidence. Just to sum up, the Chinese have two religions, very ancient, but this is how they go. Taoism. Do not worry about what happens to the earth, because whatever happens, nature will cure it. Okay? And sure enough, the earth does right itself after volcanoes and tidal waves and all kinds of things like that. But there's another religion that was produced by Confucius. And Confucians say, don't worry about the state of the earth because man can improve it. And with those two beliefs, you should have confidence in the future, because the future will be brighter than any of us can imagine. COVID, we will lick it. All the other problems, we will lick them. It'll be better. Believe that, because that's what all children should believe and all educationalists should be teaching. The future is brighter than we can yet imagine. Take care. Thank you for listening.